There's been a lot of talk about the geopolitical impact of the tensions in the Middle East between Iran and the United States. But of course, there's also a real human angle to all of this, and that is really encapsulated by Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, the British-Iranian woman who's been imprisoned in Iran since 2016. And many people are worried that her situation will only become more dangerous because of the ongoing rising tensions. We're joined now by her husband, Richard. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Good morning, Sophie.
Your wife's been in jail for 4 years now, which is pretty sobering. How is she?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I spoke to her yesterday. She was flat, worried, but probably less so than the week before, which had been just after the missile attacks, and there was a real panic running through the ward. Yesterday, there was huge sadness for her, but also for everyone that had lost their lives from the plane being brought down. You're right, we've been in prison now for nearly 4 years. That takes a huge toll. It's 4 years that she's been held essentially as a hostage. And we've tried different things, ranting at the government, being nice about the government, calling and writing nice letters to the Iranian authorities, and none of that's got anywhere. And over time, that makes things fragile and volatile, and there are all sorts of health dynamics that come with it. Recently, last week was taken in the middle of the night to see the prison clinic because she'd have an irregular heartbeat and was put on beta blockers just to calm down the panic attacks that she's getting. And she's one of a number of British nationals, of foreign nationals who are being held by the Iranian authorities, who are being held as bargaining chips in different forms and different leverage, which makes us in the middle of all this very, very fragile, very vulnerable. And there's probably a worry at a really simple, almost selfish level of, gosh, what does this mean for our case? As all these wider things play out, will she ever get home?
Yeah, will she ever get home? Another Christmas that she's missed. This week, your daughter had her first day at school.
Yes.
A milestone that many mothers will always remember.
Yes, no, that's right. And that was lovely that she is big enough to go to school, and I was very proud and took photographs of her in her school uniform, and she was not daddy enough, and then went, and bless her, it was, like getting I had her blood out of a stone to get to tell what actually happened at school, and she would explain that she'd had sausages for lunch and they'd had cake. Actually, learning was a bit hard. I had to talk to the teacher to find out. But yes, she came home with her first reading book, and so lovely that life goes on for us, and for those who followed our story. For a long, long time, Gabriella was kept in Iran, and we only got clearance to bring her back in November. So for a long time, I've been almost like a semi-permanent campaigner, just maintaining job, kind of a bachelor pad, and actually now to have lots of pink and toys and that sort of real life re-emerging in the family home has been lovely. But in some ways quite hard for Nazanin that our lives are moving on. She wasn't there for her first day at school. She wasn't there for this Christmas that we've just passed. And she's stuck feeling the sort of the kind of impermanence of time, that it just, nothing moves for her.
We've seen, of course, the escalating tensions between the US and Iran, and of course now the arrest of the UK ambassador to Iran. How worried are you that this could impact on Nazanin's situation?
Yeah, I think it was a really worrying development. I was quite clear on the media last week that one of the things we're always pushing for is the rule of law in Iran, and that Iran upholds international law, and when you start to play fast and loose with international law, as the Americans clearly were doing, that has consequences. Equally, the fact that there's been this huge, legitimate outpouring of grief and sadness and anger at how could this plane have been brought down by ordinary Iranians. The arrest of the ambassador and the attempt to try and turn that into, this is a foreign plot, it's the British organising the protest, which is what the Iranian press TV has put out. It's a really bad sign for us, because what it means, again, is that here they're trying to build a narrative of it's a foreign plot and we're besieged. And of course, we are in the middle of all that, because Nazanin is regularly brought out as someone that was involved in overthrowing the regime and all those fake stories that were circulating. I'm glad the ambassador's out. It obviously gives him an insight as to a little bit of what Nazanin has been through. But as a sign of where things are going, the fact that the regime's instinct is A, to deny bad stuff, and then B, to blame the foreigners, is not great if you are a foreigner that's been blamed.
Do you think she could be held for longer?
So I think where we are and where we've been for quite a long time is her sentence is running, and there's that second court case that was opened, and I think if we get to the end of her first sentence, they will just add a second sentence at the end. So yes, the longer we don't get out, the more likely we are to have many more years to do.
Now, you've asked for a meeting with Boris Johnson, who of course got into trouble for wrongly saying that Nazanin was teaching when she was over there. He's apologised and retracted it, but still it's something that the Iranians seized hold of. Has he granted your request for a meeting yet?
Yeah, so that's right. We've been pushing for a meeting for a long time. I've not yet got a firm date, but I've got an understanding it's not next week, but the week after. So we're pretty close to it. I think it will be really important. And it doesn't have to be a meeting just for our family. It can be for all of the families of those who've got people held, and there are a number of us. Just for him to signal that this is a priority, that he's protecting British citizens, that actually ordinary people's lives matter in this situation. There's the big picture stuff, but there's also the real people. In this kind of context, it's really easy to all get wrapped up in geopolitics. The signalling of the Prime Minister that he is personally taking an interest matters more than ever.
We spoke to Brandon Lewis earlier, the Security Minister, and asked him what reassurances he can give you. And he was just talking more generally, I suppose, about how the government's working very hard to try and secure the release of Nazanin. Is there anything the government can do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure that's right, that he can't give any reassurances because it's a tricky situation. The reality, of course, is our situation and others is we are being held as a hostage, bargaining chips. There is clear signalling as to what they would want. The government has to work through what it does, but we've always been linked to an old debt that the UK owes Iran. It's not the most obvious time to be handing over loads of money to the Iranian authorities in the middle of what are real tensions. But that is a festering sore that, due to the way in which the Prime Minister scrambled following his comments, we got cemented too, and a link was made. And due to that, actually, unless a resolution is found, it's going to get very hard for us to get home anytime soon.
Just finally, you were talking a little bit earlier in the interview about the US actions not always following the rule of law. Do you think the actions of Donald Trump have made things safer or less safe?
I think the actions of Donald Trump have made things much more volatile, and they've shaken things up. Certainly, they have changed things an awful lot, and we were in the middle of a nuclear deal. We're now not. We were taken prior to Donald Trump. That can't be laid at his door. Certainly, his administration has got Americans home, whereas the UK hasn't succeeded. So he's done some good things. He's done some things that have made things much more fragile. Certainly, the American families, the British families, the French families are looking with great concern over the last week because, yeah, things have got much more volatile and much more scary.
Thank you so much for coming on today. It's such an important voice for us to hear in the midst of the wider geopolitical situation, and we really do have our best wishes for you and your family as well. Thank you.
Thank you.